Welcome to Padre Podcast, a place where I share what's in my heart and mind because I am a forever student and because I plan to graduate in heaven, and I hope you do too. This is episode number 2. Yes, here we are. I'm sorry for my voice. I have a cold. But, anyways, this is a nice microphone, so I hope it fixes whatever my cold is ruining. Today, we're going to talk about recycling before it was cool. Yes. Do you recycle? I wonder. I do. Am I perfect at recycling? Not really. Not really. When did I start? Honestly, I started recycling after one of my parishioners yelled at me. Yep, we had one party here at my rectory, and this parishioner noticed that I threw everything in the garbage, and this parishioner just yelled at me. It's like, and so I started recycling immediately after that. So this is something that I started doing. Well, anyways, as you know, most recently I visited the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and there is a beautiful piece of scripture that is an excellent example of recycling. And the name of that document is called Codex Climaci Rescriptus. And you are like, what? Yep, it's called Codex Climaci Rescriptus. And you are probably going to learn way more than you want to know about it. So let me tell you all about it. So, first of all, with the name Codex basically means a book. And Climaci, that's because of the name of the person. The person is St. John Climacus, and he was a monk. We're going to talk about him in a minute. And Rescriptus, that means that it was rewritten. So the book regarding St. John Climacus that was rewritten. Codex Climaci Rescriptus. So let's talk about St. John Climacus first. So St. John Climacus, or St. John of the Ladder, he was a spiritual father at St. Catherine Monastery in Sinai, Egypt. And there was this Syriac manuscript of his spiritual writings that was gathered at the Green Collection, which is a 40,000 manuscripts collection that was acquired by the Green family, who are the owners of Hobby Lobby, that probably some of you go and get your crafts from. And so that Green Collection is now part of the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Now, St. John of the Ladder's book on the spiritual life is widely read in Greek Orthodox Christian circles about the spiritual life in 30 steps, and it is represented by a ladder that has 30 steps. And each step is equivalent to a virtue. And each step is over each year of the hidden life of Christ. And so this manuscript normally is dated to the 900s. And you can actually download it on Amazon. I just downloaded it and I would like to read it. It's a favorite spiritual reading during Lent for Orthodox monks especially. Now, when this manuscript was gathered in the Green Collection, it came in almost 200 folios or gatherings of pages or sheets of parchment. And so this was written over animal skin. Okay. There is one detail about this manuscript, though, because up to now you may be wondering, why does the Green Collection have a manuscript regarding a spiritual writing of a monk, right? There is one detail, though, that the parchment was recycled parchment. That means that it had been previously used for another manuscript, which was washed and whited out in order to be ready for future manuscripts. We have to remember that we're talking about the St. Catherine Monastery where it was originally kept. And St. Catherine Monastery had quite a prolific library that produced the oldest Bible in the entire world, which is Codex Sinaiticus, which may be the topic of another Padre podcast. Hint, hint, hint in the future. And that monastery had a very efficient team of scribes, which hopefully one day I get to meet in heaven. I can't wait because my best friends have been dead for hundreds of years. So that monastery had no lack of books. And as newer versions of certain books got rewritten, they had the luxury of decommissioning older books and even Bibles in order to reuse the parchment for newer books. Well, with time, Codex Climaci Rescriptus came about. Is that the parchment that was used for the newer text, which was the one for St. John of the Ladder, that parchment started to show the signs of the text underneath. Now, that text underneath was written in Western Aramaic, which is the closest language to the language that Jesus spoke, though 600 or 700 years later. And also, some texts were written in Greek. And these texts that lay underneath were texts from across the entire Bible. Now, the Green Collection also created what is called the Green Initiative, Green Scholars Initiative. And they use a new technology that was called the multi-spectrum imaging technology. And they were able to photograph every single leaf of the manuscript to discover the text underneath the text. And this is absolutely amazing because this is where science meets faith. And there is no contradiction between the two. And that is why I truly love biblical archaeology. And this is truly the place where science and faith meet. So digital photography allowed to bring back to the surface the biblical text from the 600s, 700s-ish that had been hiding behind the 900s-ish spiritual writings of St. John of the Ladder, Climacus. And so, truly, Codex Climaci Rescriptus is recycling at its best. And this is what they found. So what I'm going to read now is from the translation of the New American Bible, are very short selections of the fragments that were displayed at the Museum of the Bible when I visited in late December. In the first page that is displayed, we have Joshua chapter 4. And in it, God ordered Joshua to make a memorial as the Israelites entered the Promised Land. Joshua 4:8. The 12 Israelites did as Joshua had commanded. They took up 12 stones from the Jordan River bed as the Lord had said to Joshua, one for each of the tribes of the Israelites. They carried them along the campsite, and there they placed them. Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon there we sat, weeping, when we remember Zion. On the poplars in its midst we hung up our harps. For there our captors asked us for the words of a song, our tormentors for joy. Sing for us a song of Zion. But how could we sing a song of the Lord in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget. May my tongue stick to my palate, if I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem beyond all my delights. Psalm 141. Lord, I call you. Hasten to me. Listen to my plea when I call. Let my prayer be incense before you, my uplifted hands, an evening offering. Leviticus 11 and 12. In this section of Leviticus, we find some dietary laws regarding purity and also circumcision laws for male babies and purification laws for the mother after childbearing. In Leviticus 8, this is the ordination of Aaron. Taking some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that was on the altar, Moses sprinkled it upon Aaron and his vestments, as well as his sons and their vestments, thus consecrating both Aaron and his vestments and his sons and their vestments. In Deuteronomy 6, God gives instructions immediately after giving the commandments. Write them on the doorposts of your houses and on your gates, when the Lord your God brings you into the land, which he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give you. Be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that house of slavery. The Lord your God shall you fear, him shall you serve, and by his name shall you swear. You shall not go after other gods, any of the gods of the surrounding peoples, for the Lord your God, who is in your midst, is a passionate God, lest the anger of the Lord your God flare up against you, and he destroy you from the land. Then we move to Job chapters 6 and 7, which is the reproach of Job to God. Do you consider your words as proof, but the sayings of a desperate man as wind? Is not life on earth a drudgery, its days like those of hireling? Like a slave who longs for the shade, a hireling who waits for wages? So I have been assigned months of futility, and troubled nights have been counted off for me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? Then the night drags on. I am filled with restlessness until the dawn. But the most significant text discovered in Codex Climaci Rescriptus is the chapters towards the end of the Gospel of Matthew. First, let's take a look at chapters 25 and 26. This is the bifolium that is pictured on the thumbnail of today's episode of Padre Podcast. Matthew 25 contains the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, the final judgment, which is the separation of the sheep and the goats. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Chapter 26, the highlight of this chapter is the Lord's Supper. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after giving thanks, he broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And after taking the cup and giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood, the blood of the covenant, that is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, from now on I will not drink of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. After singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. By the way, in this picture, the biblical text underneath is the Western Aramaic, which is almost unreadable, and it is the correct orientation, while the dark lettering of John Climacus on top is upside down. And of course, the continuation of chapter 26 in Matthew is the Passion of Jesus. And then finally, we have chapter 27. Jesus is brought before Pontius Pilate. Then we have Judas' suicide. Then we have Jesus and Barnabas. And then Jesus is condemned. From noon until 3, darkness came over the whole land. About 3 o'clock, Jesus shouted in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And when some of the bystanders heard it, they said, This man is calling for Elijah. And immediately one of them ran and got a sponge filled with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the rest said, Leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come to save him. And then Jesus cried out with a loud voice and gave his spirit. Interesting that in this text, the quote is in Aramaic. Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. And then there is the earthquake, and then the burial of Jesus, and then the sealing of the tomb, which leads to chapter 28, which is the final chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. But chapter 27 was the last leaf displayed at the Museum of the Bible when I visited. So, that was Codex Climaci Rescriptus. Are you awake? Wake up! Wake up! I don't know if you stayed this long in the video or audio. All right, one last thought. Do you ever feel like you want to rewrite your entire history only to find out that the original story resurfaces on its own and it is perfectly fine? I think Codex Climaci Rescriptus has something to teach us about that and about recycling at its best before it was even cool. All right, that's it. Have a blessed day. Bye bye.